we have a very special guest, the none other than Mr. Josh Taylor. Josh Taylor is a Navy Federal Executive Fellow at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. I met Josh and his beautiful family in Malaysia when we were living overseas for over the last 2.5 years. Josh was there, him and his family were there for about 3 or 4 years. He'll correct me when he gets a chance to speak. And Josh is going to talk to us tonight about military careers as well as Department of State careers and anything else he has to help us with in the phase of leadership and military leadership. So let me say, Josh, how are you doing, man? How are you doing tonight, brother?
I'm doing well. You'll have to excuse me. I'm a little tired. It's been a long week. Been out of the office at a leadership class, actually.
Yeah.
Senior leadership class, and those training opportunities, as we all know, are great. But anytime you're out of the office, the work doesn't stop. So even though you're supposed to focus on the training, you got to keep caught up on the work. After
Absolutely.
hours. So, but I'm super happy to be here. Thrilled to be doing this and meeting your audience.
Awesome. So my volume just got a little bit better because I was able to transfer my mic from off my table to on my chest now. So welcome to the folks.
I can hear your voice now a lot better.
Well,
it's like you were here, man.
That's awesome. So let me do this. Welcome to the folks who are in the chat and who are joining us tonight for this wonderful podcast to watch this dialogue. As always, you know what we do here. If there's any sort of questions that you have that you want to ask myself or Josh, please ask during the chat, and then we will make this as interactive as possible to answer some of those questions that comes in the chat. You know how we typically start this show. We start the show by giving the guests a little bit more of who Mr. Josh Taylor is by playing the lightning round of this or that. So Josh, tell me, man, are you ready for this? You ready?
I should have watched a couple more of your episodes before saying yes to this, but bring it, man.
All right. Let's do this. Okay. USA or Malaysia?
Oh, I'm gonna say USA. I gotta say USA, but Malaysia. My kids think they're Malaysian. They keep asking when they get to go home.
That's awesome.
I think I might get in trouble at work if I said anything other than USA.
Okay, nasi lemak or chicken tandoori?
Oh, definitely nasi lemak.
Okay, all right. Would you rather be Najib Razak or Donald Trump?
Oh, man. Najib. I'll go with Najib.
Okay. Army or Navy football?
Navy football. God, that I can't even believe you asked me that.
All right, what about this one? Hawaii or India?
That's a tough one. It's going to be Hawaii. So okay. Let's go with Hawaii.
Okay. Malaysia food for life or American food for life?
I'm going to have to go with American food for life because we're such a melting pot that Malaysians mixed in somewhere.
Got it. Okay. That's a good question. That's a good answer. I mean, that's a really good answer. Okay. Meet your great grandparents or meet your great grandchildren?
Well, I met my great grandparent. Well, one of them. So I'll go with great grandchildren.
Okay. No one shows up to your wedding or no one shows up to your funeral?
I will go with no one shows up at my funeral because I'll be dead and I won't really care. my whole thing is I'm not Irish, but I want to have an Irish style wake before I go. I want to have the whiskey, the beer, and sit around and talk story before I'm gone so I can enjoy it. And then when I'm gone, I'm gone.
Awesome. Okay. Have world peace or stop world hunger?
Man, this is a tough one. I gotta say world peace.
Okay. Be an adult your whole life or be a kid your whole life?
I'll go with be a kid my whole life. I mean, that was those were the days. I'd like to stop adulting. Every once in a while, I'd like to stop adulting right now, but here we are.
We always reminisce on the kids, on the child days, man. That was a good time. Okay. Lose your sense of smell or lose your sense of taste?
Oh. Well, if you lose your sense of smell, you lose most of your sense of taste. So I'll go with taste, and that way I only lose one of them.
Got it. Got it. Be Batman or Spider-Man?
Oh man, I think I'll be Spider-Man. I feel like Spider-Man's less tortured. Like, you know, Batman's he's like got some issues, man.
Okay. Age only from the neck up or age only from the neck down?
I'll say age only from the neck down, because I got to tell you, I was lucky enough to have all my grandparents,
Yep.
you know, with us for a long time, and none of them, you know, all of them were sharp mentally until the end. So that's an amazing thing, because I got friends who, you know, their grandparents get, you know, senile or what have you, and that's tough to deal with. So yeah, age from the neck down.
Yes, I hear you on that one. All right, be stupid in a smart world or be smart in a stupid world?
I think we may be already smart and stupid world.
I figured you were going to say that. Yeah. Okay. All right. We got about 3 more, Josh, and then we'll move on to the next segment of the dialogue we're going to have tonight. Have to say everything you think.
Good bourbon after this, by the way.
I know, man. We should be drinking bourbon now, man. Reminisce on the old days. A couple months ago. Anyway, have to say everything you think or never be able to speak again?
I pretty much say most of the things I think now, for better or for worse. So say everything that I think.
Okay. See into the future or change the past?
Oh, wow. I'll go with, ooh, man. I'd have to say see into the future. Although right. I'm a historian, so the temptation's there. But I think, you know, man, yeah, that'd be tough.
Okay.
We'll go see in the future, though.
All right. Last one. Use sandpaper as toilet paper or use hot sauce as eye drops?
Oh, we'll go with the sandpaper for toilet paper, because I'm pretty sure I've done that at some point. After you know, eating the wrong thing in Southeast Asia in Laos, it felt like I was doing that anyway. So yeah, let's go with that.
Oh man, okay, wonderful. We got some folks in the chat. My brother Erwin Henry, he's the guy that I was with last night in Houston, and Josh. Yes, let's talk about the National Guard tonight, because Ert is considering it. Tiffany Wade is in the house. My wonderful sister and Mrs. Tamara Wade is in the house as well. My other wonderful sister. So we have a crowd in here tonight. Let's do this. Let's kick this thing off, Josh. Let's do this. And everybody said this too. Everybody said, Mr. Josh, thank you so much for your service. And all 3 of the guests who are chatting so far have said that. So they want to thank you for your service, my man.
Well, can I say something real quick?
Absolutely.
Well, I would like to say you're very welcome, but I would also like to thank you for paying your taxes. We are all volunteers, but we don't just do it out of the goodness of our heart. You know, it is a profession. We're making a good living, and you know, I just like to say that, you know, we're kind of like the American people are stockholders. I mean, if you pay taxes, you're a shareholder in what we do, and so thank you for that. And also, I encourage everybody to think about, there are a lot of different ways to serve. Those of us in military tend to, get a lot of the credit and a lot of thanks. But, I was on a flight the other day and the TSA agent, guy in uniform, different uniform, thanked me for my service.
Yep.
And I looked at him and I said, thank you for yours. Because they're obviously we're the most visible, but there are a lot of ways to serve our country and serve your community. So I encourage everybody to look for different ways to do that. Even it's something as simple as, volunteering as a little league coach.
Yep.
It all makes a difference.
Absolutely, Josh. And tonight with our conversation, I want to go into, ways that we can do that. We have some folks that are watching us that are our age, some folks that are older, some folks that are younger, some folks that are going to college, some folks that maybe even in high school as well too. So this is a quite wide range of folks, and let's try to talk about that as much within our conversation. Yeah. So to kick this off, let's do this. You're active military. Tell everyone your journey, Josh. Tell everyone your story, my man.
Okay, so I grew up in a small town in northern New Jersey, Mahwah, New Jersey. We're about half an hour outside of Manhattan. Nice place to grow up, very suburban. Growing up in the predominantly in the 80s. Yep. Both my folks were teachers, so I'd say we were comfortable middle class, not making a lot of money on two teacher salary. Little bit about my heritage. I'm like what I'd like to call an American mutt. Somebody like me, I think, only happens in America. On my dad's side, like no joke, like my grandma, bless her, was into genealogy. She could trace our family back to like the third boat after the Mayflower. Had relatives and fought in the Revolution and everything like that. But on my dad's side of the family, on my mom's side of the family, I'm only second generation American.
Okay.
Because her parents had to flee Germany as German Jews right before World War II. Luckily, they escaped literally with their lives, but not a lot else. And they came here and they started over. And here I am. Most other countries in the world, you're not going to get two people meeting from such different backgrounds and having a family and raising two successful kids. I'm in the military. My brother is he worked in the music industry for about a dozen years. Now he rebranded himself. He's in sustainability now, so he's working on land use policy for the state of New Jersey and everything. But grew up, did well in school. Went through a bit of adversity. My folks got divorced. Yeah. I'll be honest, I was sexually abused by a babysitter, worked through that. I've got a good buddy who's doing a really good work. He's got an organization called Male Survivor. Yep. So came through that, bit socially awkward, always did really well in school, but a little socially awkward. Yep. Growing up, and, always been fascinated by history, specifically military history. Not a strong military background in my family, but of course my grandfather served during World War II. My mom's dad was enlisted in the Army. My dad's dad was a naval supply officer. Okay. During World War II. And so I grew up about 45 minutes from West Point, the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, Army, and loved going up there and just thought it was super cool. And then around about middle school, I'd say, started to think about, hey, flying's really cool. And my dad had a buddy, his high school buddy, that went to Dartmouth, so Ivy League, on a Navy Reserve Officer Training Corps scholarship and ROTC. And he flew cargo planes off of aircraft carriers during the Vietnam War. And then he went on to be a commercial airline pilot for 30 years. And I thought that sounded like a pretty good deal. Get school paid for, learn a trade, get out, and, be a commercial pilot. Well, at some point, I learned about U.S. Naval Academy and thought that that was a pretty good option
So how,
because,
how, how was that, Josh? How was that introduced to you? You said some point. How was a Naval Academy introduced to you?
well, so I was already really familiar with West Point because we lived fairly close, had been up there a bunch, and I knew there was West Point for Army,
Yeah.
Navy, Annapolis Naval Academy for Navy and Marine Corps. Okay, keeping in mind that the Marine Corps is technically part of the Department of the Navy, so I think they just increased it, so almost a quarter of the graduating class can take commissions in the U.S. Marine Corps, and of course there's a U.S. Air Force Academy. There's actually, I'll plug two other service academies. One is Coast Guard Academy,
Yep.
which a lot of people don't think of, and the one that people really don't think of is the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy at Kings Point, New York.
And what is
And
that,
through
Josh?
so the Merchant Marine Academy, you basically get licensed as a merchant mariner to drive large cargo ships, tankers, what have you, which is very lucrative. I'll tell you. But the other cool thing about Kings Point is you can take a commission in any of the armed services, right? So you don't have to. You can stay merchant marine and then stay as a civil merchant, civil mariner, right? Or you can go into any of the services. So if you're looking for a fully federally funded undergrad education, we've got 5 different options funded by the American taxpayer.
Yep.
So I thought that sounded like a pretty good deal. I remember around about 7th grade, visited the campus and decided, hey, this is where I want to go. So already did pretty well in school, but doubled down on the academics. Also athletics, extracurriculars. All of the service academies are highly competitive. They're some of the most competitive schools in the nation to get into. Obviously, it's funded, but it's also hyper competitive because they only let. So here's the thing: most colleges, universities, people drop out of the class. They'll take transfer students, right, to fill up that class. At the service academies, because it's as much about leadership and that forming the basis for a career in service as it is academics. So if you have people drop out of the class, nobody's coming in to take that space. So they're highly selective. It's about a 10% acceptance rate, and they really do look for the whole person. Obviously, you have to be academically strong. All of the schools are more or less science, tech, engineering, and mathematics schools, particularly the Naval Academy and Air Force Academy. West Point, a little less so. Keeping in mind that in the Army and Marine Corps, the primary weapon system, as it were, are people. They're people-focused services, and machinery and equipment support people.
Yeah.
In the Navy and Air Force, just due to the virtue of our operational environment, right? People support machines, right? You can't have a Navy if your ship sinks, and you can't have your Air Force isn't going to work out too well if the plane's falling out of the sky. Right. So that's why Air Force and Navy focus a little bit more on the technical aspects, and the other ones are more human focused. So went through high school. Had the opportunity to do it's called all of the service academies have summer programs ranging from sports camps to science to STEM camps, and then the Naval Academy has a for rising seniors, so your junior to senior summer, they have what's called summer seminar, where you can basically go there for a week, and it's almost like a simulation of you like to go there.
Yep.
So I got selected for that, did that.
So Josh, just pause for a quick second. So you got exposure very early to the military services in the schools. So was it the fact that your grandfather, your great grandfather, was it the fact that they were in the military that gave you that exposure, or what was it that gave you that exposure that, hey, you know, this is a possibility? And it seems like you made that decision very early that this is a possibility, or this is where I'm going to take my career. Where did you get that exposure from? Was it family members? Where was it exactly?
So, what's ironic is growing up late 70s, 80s, my parents is where everybody's still coming kind of out of the Vietnam experience. My parents didn't want me playing guns when I was a kid and what have you, but I don't know what it was, but it just,
they were teachers, always been, right? Both of them were teachers. I mean,
exactly. My dad tried to serve during the Vietnam War. Unfortunately, he's blind in his eye. He had his right eye removed when he was a kid because he had a tumor. So nobody would take him. So I didn't have any immediate legacy of it. And today, with the all-volunteer force, we are almost completely a legacy force in that the vast majority of people who enlist and come in as officers are basically just, have it, in their family, mom and or dad served, which is, in my opinion, that's a problem because we're kind of that civil military relationship. We need to keep that connection between the military and, the society, the American people. We're kind of in danger of losing that just because of it's kind of becoming a family business. But what I'll say is, for me, it was the military. I wish I had a better answer. There was just something about it that sparked my fascination, that grabbed me.
Yeah.
And, for your viewers, I would say that, like, those things that grab you as a kid, like, don't necessarily, put those things aside as, hey, that childish things, and it's time for me to grow up and, find a career, right? If something sparks to you, like, obviously military, there are many different pathways to that were available to me, but I'll use the example of my brother. My brother, ever since he was in middle school, has just loved music.
Yeah.
I don't share his same taste in music. He's like a Fish Dave Matthews, like, jam band kind of guy. But fine. But that's his thing.
Yep. Good music. That's good music.
God bless him. God bless him. He learned how to play guitar. He can write decent lyrics, but he cannot sing. Right? So here's a guy who loves music, who wants to go into music, and some people would just say either like, I'm not good, I can't do it, or some other people would say like, oh, no, I can make it. I'll get my break. He was realistic, and he found a way. So he found a school that had a very well respected music industry program.
Yep.
So he went there to, was president of the music industry club, learned all about, concert production, being a booking agent or what have you, so, a lot of kids grow up, saying, hey, I want to be a ball player. I want to be a, professional athlete. And, they're very few of us are so blessed.
Yes.
But
true.
If that's the thing that grabs you, right, and it could be whatever, you name the subject, right? You can find a path to it. You just have to be, I think, you have to know yourself well enough to, at a certain point, say, hey, do I have what it takes? What it takes to be at a certain level? And there's a certain level of, humility that you have to take to it. And I know you were a ball player, and I think at a certain point,
I couldn't do it.
Some people have to have that introspection because an injury comes along or something like forces that, and other people, it's maturity. It's at a certain point you take stock and you figure out, is this a sustainable path?
Yeah,
and you find a way to work in an area that you love in a way that fits your God-given talents.
Yeah.
So sorry, that was a really long answer. I'm a long talker.
No, it was good. It was good.
You need to shut up. Just give me the time.
So on to you got exposed to it your high school years. You were doing camps, even sports
Yeah.
camps. Continue
Yeah.
on from there, like that exposure to that early on in life, and then go into like your education. Obviously, your both of your parents were teachers. You are
Yeah.
a very well read, successful guy who does a lot of stuff, and you travel the world nonstop. So I want to get into this piece of it as well too. So in your story, kind of talk about how you got exposed to it, especially all the camps and stuff like that in your earlier years, then your education, all that you've gotten, and then after that.
So yeah, my parents are teachers, so I just grew up in that kind of environment. Learning was highly valued. Grades, I was going to get good grades, and it was explained to me very early on that number one, I was going to go to college.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't a question. I was going to go. Number two, I was going to figure out a way to get money to go to college because on teacher salaries, it was going to be tough to do. It was basically, unless you figure out a way to get some scholarships, you're going to go to a state school. And what I would say is nothing wrong with a state school. They're outstanding state schools. Even better than that, one of the things that I have 3 young kids. I've got a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old twins.
Yeah.
If my kids were going to school today, I think the best advice that I would give them is go to a community college for the first 2 years. Knock out your basic requirements and transfer, because nobody cares where you go your first 2 years.
You're right about
All
that.
they care is where that degree is from, right?
Yeah.
And it's actually, I was listening to the radio the other day. It's an increasing trend.
Mm-hmm.
Even the big schools, the Ivy League schools, the Stanfords and what have you, are increasing their recruitment and basically quotas in the classes for community college transfers. So people who think that college is out of reach, there are ways to do it smart. So anyway, back to my story. Mom and Dad said you're going to figure out ways to do it. That's why I was looking so hard at ROTC. Very flexible. The service academies were appealing for that. I was lucky enough to get in. Keeping in mind, if you're talking service academy, there are 3 components that you need. You have to be accepted by the school, which that's just a standard college application. It's really no different.
Yep.
You have to be obviously medically, physically qualified. There is a screening process for that because you have to be able to serve. So that's non-standard. And then there's the third piece, which is really intimidating to a lot of people until you actually go and do it, is you need a congressional or senator nomination to go.
Oh,
Each
wow.
congressperson and senator gets allotted a number of slots at each service academy. And maybe it was like this in the old days. It's like you had to know somebody or like contribute to the campaign, and it's not that way anymore. So it's essentially almost identical to the college application process.
Okay.
They're going to ask for your transcript and letters of recommendation, and you'll have a face-to-face interview. If anybody's thinking about doing it and say, well, I don't know anybody, or I wasn't a big campaign donor or whatever, I don't let that hold you back.
Right.
And in fact, if you get into I got into the school and I was able to go to my senators and congressperson and say, hey, look, I'm into the school. I just need the nomination. And that's a no-brainer for them because they, obviously they don't want to waste their nomination. But so did that, got in, spent 4 years at the Naval Academy. I was a history major. A weird thing about the Naval Academy is everybody graduates with a Bachelor of Science because the core curriculum is so STEM oriented.
Yep.
So I have a Bachelor of Science in history. I'm one of the few people that you'll ever meet with that particular degree. And
what is history?
I went there.
So Josh, sorry. So what is history? Is that liberal arts now for most science?
So yeah, schools? I mean, almost like 99.9% of schools that you'd get a Master of the Arts, or not in Master of the Arts, but you would get a BA.
A BA. Okay,
Bachelor of the
Arts. Okay.
So that's liberal arts.
Yep. Continue on, sir.
And, you know, I tried to convince myself that I'm going to be an engineer, because my parents were like, you want to be an engineer because, you know, jobs and, you know, go that route. And it's not that it's not interesting. And, you know, they had a point. But I've always been so much more interested in human systems and how humans interact, and how human society works. And history is basically the story of how individuals and societies consider problems, problem solve, create brand new problems, you know, work through things. So that was just more, a lot more, you know, exciting to me.
Yep.
And it really brought some, I think, much needed balance to the education, because, and here's the thing, you know, that the technical knowledge is good, but I mean, you're in software, man, you know,
yep.
the technical piece changes so fast.
Yep.
That, you know, if you took programming in college, you know, it's probably out of date. You know, what, 8-10 years ago? Well, I forget exactly when you graduated. You're a lot younger than I am. But so that,
yes.
that technical aspect is always refreshing, and it's changing really fast. But human nature, believe it or not, you know, the trappings change, but human nature really hasn't changed all that much for the past 3,000 years. And it doesn't matter. You know, so if my thing was growing up, I was the book smart kid. I was people stupid, right? And I think if you look around right now to some very prominent people, it's more important to be people smart than it is book smart. People smart will get you further, and people smart is applicable to every industry that you'll ever work in. So that's why history spoke to me. While I was at the academy, played rugby, practiced martial art, Aikido. So after 4 years there, graduated. I was commissioned into the Navy. Initially, so I went to flight school. I was a naval flight officer. The specific aircraft that I was assigned to, we did radar and communications jamming. So in really simple terms, in Top Gun, I was Goose. I was the guy sitting in the back, running the radar and the weapon systems and everything. My aircraft was not nearly as cool as an F-14. We were kind of the chess club. You know, we'd go out there and we essentially played defense so the other folks could go play offense. You know, we would jam surface-to-air missiles, early warning radar. Later on, after I flew back before Iraqi freedom. Second invasion of Iraq, we were patrolling the no-fly zones over Iraq, north and south, and then was there just for the tail end of the initial invasion of Iraq. And then once you know, Iraq started going bad with the insurgency, they started to deploy us because we had certain capabilities regarding IEDs. Mm-hmm. So we had, not only did we help protect aircraft, but we helped protect the troops on the ground. So I have to say that was an unsung but very important and fulfilling mission, knowing that you're protecting Americans. So did that for 2 tours, both land-based and on aircraft carriers. In between those tours, I had the opportunity to take advantage of. So here's the thing. Once you're in government service, and I'll say government service because it's not just the military. If you go work for the State Department, CIA, once you're in there, there are all sorts of amazing opportunities for graduate education, right?
Yep.
So I took advantage of a master's program where I got a master's in organizational management at George Washington University, which is, you know, they'd yell at me. It's kind of like MBA light, it focuses a lot more on organizational behavior, change management, coaching, mentoring, not so much on the finance and marketing side. So I got a degree in that. At the same time, I did a series of 6-month internships,
Yep.
right? So I interned with the Joint Staff, Navy staff, and then spent 6 months at the Navy Senate Liaison Office up on Capitol Hill. So kind of got a peek behind the curtain at a young age. Invaluable perspective that I brought forward to my subsequent assignments. So for your audience out there, if you're ever given an opportunity to go to corporate, to intern or do a short stint, right, as a junior person, take it, because you will carry that perspective with you when you go back to the line, and you'll be able to then translate that big picture strategy from corporate down to the folks, and vice versa, and it'll just help you out immeasurably. So from
Josh,
there,
I want to ask a question here. So
yeah.
You graduated from the Naval Academy, and
Yep.
then you served in the later stages of the Iraqi War, and you decided to go back and get your master's. So what was that decision based on? Because I know I have a friend of mine who's getting his master's as well in project management,
Yep.
supply chain, and he's also in the U.S. Air Force. And for folks who are in obviously military services, tell them why you chose to go back to get a continuing education. You share that story. Why you decided to do that?
So for military officers, if you're going to progress past your initial kind of stint, it's more or less required to get higher education. So to get at least one master's.
Yep.
So what I'll say is, the perception, and I think I don't think a lot of people still think this way. I think this is, outdated, but, if there's any perception out there that, military members are, knuckle draggers, even the Marines, God bless them, it's just not the case. I mean, it's a highly educated workforce, definitely in the officer corps, more and more the enlisted corps as well, for your higher ranks. So for me, it was the decision. I knew I wanted to pursue graduate education. I saw another opportunity to do so on Navy funding. I wasn't sure whether how long I was going to stay in at that point. So I figured if I could get another degree, it would just had the opportunity. The timing worked for this program, and when you have the opportunity to take advantage of a program like that, it gives you further options. It gives you further decision space. It just opens up additional doors.
Okay.
So for me, needed to recharge the batteries. Freshly wanted to get back to the East Coast. The subject matter was really interesting. It was a really condensed program because I also knocked out some military education requirements. So that was an action-packed 2 years. And so, yeah, organizational management, again, seems like a really flexible degree, and it is, because it's one of those things where regardless of whether it's, what kind of company or organization it is, profit, nonprofit, understanding organizational dynamics, how to develop an organizational strategy, manage, lead and manage change is invaluable.
So if I was to say this, Josh, because you said this, you said, I was book smart, and then you said, an area where you wanted to, strengthen, or you spoke about was a weakness early on was, people smart. So did you make the decision to get, the organizational, I believe it's a change of organization behavior master's, because you were feeling that need of, educating yourself on people, to fill that potential weakness that you said you may have had?
It wasn't conscious, but now that you bring it up,
Okay.
thank you, Antoine. You just helped me have an epiphany about my entire higher education. But
One
yeah,
second,
no,
one second. 1 second, Josh. Okay, so we've got some more people in the chat. Tam Wade said rugby, yes. SOBC, Stover Black Conservative, said he played rugby in college too. And Tamara Wade
nice.
says, what is one thing you learned in the military that you apply to the corporate world? I'm sure there's a lot. Ooh.
Yeah, there's a lot. I would say that, you know, you'll read all sorts of books, and you know, yeah, I could go into a lot, but the thing that jumps to my mind is whenever, so every year we're required, we get our annual fitness reports, or when you leave a command, or your boss leaves, you get an evaluation.
Yep.
And kind of the three things that I always make sure that I hit, that I think encapsulate, you know, not just what you do in the military, but what you do in any organization. Number one, operate. You need to be operationally excellent. So in you know, the military, that's whatever your main specialty is, whether you're a pilot, you're a submarine driver, whether you're an infantry person, or what have you. In the corporate world, that would be, you know, be the best, you know, marketer, best salesman, or best business developer that you can be. You need to be technically excellent, right? So that's number one. Okay. Number two, you have to be an outstanding manager. You have to manage stuff, right? So operationally excellent, manage stuff to include programs and money. And you need to be able to lead people and change. And I hate to oversimplify it, but for me, it boils down to that trinity, right? Operational excellence, technical excellence, right?
Yep.
Manage stuff, you know, money and programs, and three, lead people and change. Now, all of us, regardless of what organization you're in, need to do all three of those things simultaneously. Okay. And it's a kaleidoscope, right? Which one of those has primacy at any one time will, you know, is very situationally dependent. What I will say is, though, as you progress through your career, always keep in mind your value necessary and what you're getting paid to do, right? Something that I see, you know, so when you first come into the military, let's take military aviation. What's the taxpayer paying you to do? Primarily, they're paying you to be as operationally excellent as you possibly can, right? There shouldn't be anybody who's a better stick than you are, right?
Yep.
So you're getting paid to fly. You're getting paid to be operationally excellent. Just like if you're in a corporate world, you get hired on as a salesman, right? You're getting paid to sell, right? Or if you're a programmer, you're getting paid to code, right? You need to do with a little bit of that leadership and management stuff, you know, maybe situationally at the lower level. But as you go up the chain, right, that changes to now you're a manager. You need to maintain your knowledge base, have credibility with the folks that are working for you, mentor them along, right? But you're not necessarily getting paid to sit there and be, you know, on the line, you know, as, you know, the operator, right?
Yep.
And then eventually, once you get up to an even higher level, right, you're not getting paid to, I mean, you're getting paid to lead. You're getting paid to set direction, create the climate of excellence that your people can thrive in, that your people can, you know, do the work. You know, I'm gonna butcher the quote from Jobs, is that, you know, Steve Jobs said something along the lines of, is like, you know, his job isn't to have brilliant ideas and tell people what to do. His job is to hire brilliant people and enable them to have the brilliant ideas and, you know, advance, what have you. And that's so you're going to always do those three things. You're going to be operationally excellent, manage stuff, and lead people and change, but it's going to change. But overall, as you go up higher and higher, always, you know, especially when you start getting overwhelmed, getting hit from all angles, like, project this, and we're all pulled all different directions. When you find yourself getting stressed, take that little time out and ask yourself, okay, what am I getting paid to do?
Yep.
What is my unique value necessary that nobody else can provide?
Yeah.
To use that as kind of a clarifying thought, I think is helpful, because it's way too easy, especially now that we're all connected all the time. We're way too easy to get just overwhelmed and pulled in all sorts of directions.
Got it. No,
anyway,
that's a very good.
That's what I would recommend.
No,
Yep.
That's very good, Josh. That's very good. So we got another question that came in from Story of a Black Conservative, which is a good one. What's the biggest roadblock you have faced working as a leader within the federal government? What's up, Clark Way? How are you?
So, okay, block. Well, what I'll say is, so one of the challenges that you have in federal service that you don't necessarily have as much in the civilian world, although you do to a certain extent due to union rules and regulations and what have you. But believe it or not, we don't have a lot of control over the manpower piece. So in the corporate world, right, if you go back and you read like Jim Collins' Good to Great and what have you, one of the big things he talks about is like, when you come into an organization, you got to get the wrong people off the bus and the right people on the bus. Well, believe it or not, in the military, but this goes for Department of State and federal service, it's tough to get. It's easier to get the wrong people off the bus, although it can be difficult. But oftentimes we don't. It's not like we're hiring, and we can go out and hire on our team.
Right.
So when you take over as a manager, mid-level officer, or even as a commanding officer, with the exception of maybe one or two folks, like, you got the team that you're getting. It's not like you're an executive or you go out and you can, assemble, super friends to go on and take a challenge. So you, and that's why I think one of the reasons that I think that, people with prior military service are, highly sought after in the commercial sector is you get really used to figuring out how to lead, or at the very least deal with every sort of person under the sun. Because I'm here to tell you, we ain't all heroes. There are heroes amongst us, but there are plenty of dirtbags in uniform. I mean, we're just a microcosm of any other organization that anybody's been in. You're going to have your stellar superstars. Most people are okay, and you're going to have your 1090 people or 80-20 people. You know what those are, right?
Yep. Absolutely. Yep. So Josh, that was
and then of course resources. Resources, because unlike the commercial sector, we are in a very fixed budget. Believe it or not, as big as the DoD budget is, by the time it gets down to whatever office you happen to be working in, it's never enough. But I mean, that's pretty much the bottom line for any organization. So
yeah. So you hit on a couple things that I want to probe a little bit further in, Josh. And you talked about, you said that's why military people are highly sought after in the corporate world. And let me just say this. In my grad school studies, I found out how great military servicemen were in communication and leadership during my grad school years. And it was far beyond anything that I've ever experienced in my entire life before then. And I just saw it. I was like, wow, like the guys who served in the military, the David Rouse, the Mikes, those guys were just exceptional at communication and just getting stuff done, the Nolans, right? Tell me, what is it that you learn within the military that just gives you that leadership ability where you can basically accept people from all different backgrounds that you're not choosing, and you have to just deal with them? And it's not like it's not like you can choose your basketball team. No, you're not choosing your basketball team. You're giving a basketball team. and you're told to figure it out. Like, talk about that piece of it, the leadership and how people are able to do that.
Okay. So first off, I'll say is that the military starts you young. Now the Army and Marine Corps, you're going to be 4 years out of college, and you're going to be in charge of a company of 150 soldiers or Marines, right? The Navy and Air Force, we take command much later, just due to the technical nature. But from day one, even whether you're ROTC at the academy or even if you come in through OCS, clear, concise communications is absolutely taught and practiced and literally drilled into your head. That you need to be able to distill the direction that you're receiving from higher headquarters or what have you, and distill it down into terms that make sense and resonate with your troops. And I'll use the term troop very generically. Okay, if you have people working for you in whatever organization, they're your troops, right? So communications very important. As far as the leadership, leadership started from day one too, in that we're given opportunities at a very young age to start and to practice. But what the military does is we don't just drop you into a leadership situation with no training, plenty of training. But the other thing that we do is, especially at the junior level, you're going to have a senior enlisted, right? So you're going to have a division chief. You're going to have that sergeant first class. You're going to have a very experienced, operator, basically being your assistant and your mentor behind closed doors. We're also big on that's a professional relationship. You also have your senior officers who are mentoring you and bringing you along, and even informal mentors. So there's an incredibly strong support network. There's formal training, but we also give people early experience. If people are getting off track, there are any number of ways that they're going to be given feedback and opportunities to modify their behavior and brought along. And it's only in the most extreme situations where, somebody's just not cut out for it. Yeah, I mean, not everybody's cut out for every line of work. And, man, you're like a 23-year-old kid right out of college, and maybe it's not going to work out. But, that's very rare that, we have to separate people. So it's formal training, experience, lots of mentorship.
Yep.
But as far as how do you lead people from all sorts of different backgrounds, this is where the military's strong organizational culture really comes in, because we're an all-volunteer force. Since 1973, I think it was, everybody who's in uniform wants to be there, right?
Yep.
More or less. More or less. Now, there's some downsides to the all-volunteer force. Personal opinion, I feel like the American people have lost their connection to the military, and because we are volunteers, we appreciate being thanked for our service, but sometimes it feels like, people can say thank you for your service and, have fun over in Afghanistan for 17 years. And I feel that people have lost a sense of ownership of their military, and for some reason feel like, hey, I didn't serve, so I can't really ask questions of our political leaders as to maybe why are we still doing this after 17 years. But what it has done, so that's a little bit of a political tangent there, and I'm trying to stay away from the politics, but I do think civil military relations are very important, because we are the nation's, our society's military. We're not the government's. We support and defend the Constitution. We obey the lawful orders of the president, right? But it's really, I said it before, I'll say it again. We work for the American people.
Do you think, Josh? Josh, do you think that everyone should serve to get that sense of connection back?
Personal opinion. personal opinion, and in fact, there's a commission in DC looking at universal service. Not necessarily personally, I would love to see everybody serve, not necessarily in uniform.
Okay.
The military is not for everybody, and what I would say is I don't know a single military leader who would want everybody to serve in the military, like they do in small countries like Switzerland, Israel. Those countries, everybody does their 1 year, and then they're in the reserves forever. I think what I would do is, and it's very difficult to. Have you noticed it's difficult to make Americans do anything? We really don't like being told like you will do this. I think you could incentivize national service. Whether in military, AmeriCorps, Peace Corps, bring back the Civil Conservation Corps. It's not like we don't have infrastructure that needs to be rebuilt. But if you invested, in some sort of like treasury bill or something for every American born, that after 2 years of national service, when they're 25, they get like, $250,000 or what have you. And they can use that for whatever they want, whether start a business, buy a home, blow it in Vegas. Doesn't matter. Their money, right?
Right.
But that's their nest egg. And those people who don't want to serve for whatever reason, that's fine. Thank you very much. You take that money and you plow it back in to the nest egg in an endowment. I think this thing becomes very self-sustaining over time. It's incentivized. We're not telling anybody they have to, right? But I think what that will do is, and I think one of the challenges that we face right now, especially in our divisive political times, is that we're sorely lacking in a sense of national brotherhood, of national identity. Okay, for better or for worse, through 45 years of the Cold War, man, we had our internal problems. 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. I mean, civil rights, women's rights, you name it. There are issues, okay? But we were working on them. But at the end of the day, we got the Russians, okay? And we had an existential threat. We had other people to define ourselves against. So, yeah, as Americans, we might have some issues with each other. But at the end of the day, at the water's edge, we're not the bad guys. The bad guys are trying to beat us, right? Yep. Before that, we had fascism, we had Hitler, we had what have you. And then when we won the Cold War, all that went away. So this artificial, unifying threat just went away. And what's happened since then? We've started to spin, and nobody started in, because there's nothing unifying to have us, work through those issues, set them aside. I mean, clearly the issues need to be worked through, but we need to have a common vision that brings us together. And I think national service, because here's the thing, especially now with social media, it's so easy to get stuck in the echo chamber and only interact with people who think like you do, believe like you do, right? Yep. We're all guilty of it in one way or the other, right? And because we don't have face-to-face interaction with people different from us, really easy to stereotype, right? So I think what that national service would do is, for 2 years, you would work side by side like we do in the military with people from every different part of the country, every race, religion, creed, orientation. And you know what? It's not like people are going to come out. Some of them might be best friends. Probably not realistic that everybody's going to get along, but at least everybody would have a common touch point. And at least somebody would say, you know what? I know you're saying all, Mexicans or all Jews are like this, but I served with Jose, or I served with, whoever, and he or she was pretty good.
Right.
He or she was so it would, I think, really humanize ourselves to each other. And
that's a good point.
So easy to get caught up in these images that we have of each other. So anyway, that's a really long tangent.
No, but that was important, Josh. You think about it. You basically just solve a lot of the challenge that we have today in America with just exposure, right? And I think the challenges that we have in America, a lot of the times, especially when it comes down to biases and stereotypes, it's the fact that we have not been exposed to certain kinds of people. And what we've been exposed to, we've been exposed to the media's portray of certain kinds of people, which may not always be accurate, right? Well, the majority of the time, I would say it's probably not accurate. So that is interesting, man. That is a very interesting solution. Okay, continue on, sir.
So going back to, so really, in order, so how do you, so number one, we have this kind of unifying culture. So what the military is really good about is it doesn't matter your background. You go through boot camp, you go through some sort of indoctrination to, it's not to get rid of your identity. That's I think a common misperception is like, you hear the term break them down so you can build them up. And there is a little bit of that, but it's really to build a group identity that subsumes each individual identity that people bring to this organization. Because when the chips are down, you've got to be able to rely on each other. So the military culture is really good about creating a common identity that will rest on top and unify everybody's different backgrounds. So everybody's there because they more or less want to be. They're acculturated into the shared identity. And then but you still have to, you have to set clear direction. You have to give people the why, right? Yeah. A great example that I'll give is that, so I was in Saudi Arabia patrolling, my squadron was stationed in Saudi Arabia patrolling over Iraq, southern Iraq, during 9/11. I remember being in the ready room watching the towers come down on the TV. And if you remember, we weren't sure exactly who was behind it, who did it. We didn't know whether it was Saddam Hussein, what was going on, but we knew that we were at war. And at the time, I was first lieutenant, and first lieutenant is the Navy term for essentially chief janitor and groundskeeper. So I was running the motor pool, and I had the sailors that their job was to clean the barracks, clean the heads, clean the bathrooms, right? And basically do all of the odd jobs that nobody wanted to do. And a lot of them were there because they had gotten in trouble, and everybody they needed to go somewhere. So it's kind of like the land of misfits, right? And then so I went to them. I pulled them all together and I said, hey, look, we're at war. We're not sure the details yet, but we've just been attacked and this is happening. And I said, I know you've got a lot of emotions. I know you want to get into it. And what's your job? Your job is to, clean heads, make sure that the water's stocked, in the barracks and, and in the hangars and what have you. I know none of you joined to do this, right? But it's an important job because if those bathrooms aren't clean, people get sick. If people get sick, they're not turning wrenches on the jet, right? So
give them a reason.
So basically, I told them, like, I showed them how this thing that nobody wanted to do, nobody signed up to do, was actually vitally important in the big picture. And I think as a leader of any organization, right, if you can, there's a book out right now that says called like Begin with Why or something. You got to give people the so what, and you have to take the time to build your credibility as a leader with them as you can by showing them how they matter and what they do matters. Because there's going to be times in, your work, regardless of the organization, where you don't have that time, where you just need to be able to turn to your team and say, hey, I need you guys to do this. Right.
Yep.
And you need to invest, you need to have that credibility with your people beforehand. Right. Because, you don't always have time to explain in the heat of the moment. So, plug them into the big picture. We get experience early. We get experience in a lot of different, different contexts. But you're always going to have those leadership challenges. You get you get a chance to see a lot of different leadership techniques. And, you know, you have to find the leadership technique that works for you.
Right.
You know,
Right.
I've got folks that, you know, great mentors or folks that I respect a lot, incredibly effective leaders. If I tried to use their leadership technique, wouldn't work because it's not authentic to me.
Right.
So you absolutely, you can't bullshit your people.
Right.
Okay. You have to find a leadership techniques that's authentic to you. You have to be able to you have to be willing and able to be humble enough to listen to your people. I'm going to use a word. You have to be willing to be a bit vulnerable to connect with your people. Because it's really that connection. If you don't connect, the communication is not going to flow. If you can't communicate, nothing's going to happen. So,
no, that's good, Josh. That was fantastic.
So I'm willing to go as long as you want.
Well, that's where I want to jump in. Tamara said, "I agree. Everyone is not fit to serve, but I think everyone should be of service." That's good.
And that goes back to, I mean, something is so. One of the things that, you know, I encourage your, you know, I did a leadership for a young leader forum at CSIS a few weeks ago. One of the things that you talked about is, you know, when you're junior in an organization, right, you don't have a lot of, you know, leadership opportunities if you're a research assistant or intern or something. But if you think about it, there are a ton of opportunities in volunteer organizations. Gosh, something as simple as like Board of Education, you know, Lions Club, Masons, what have you, where you can go into leadership opportunities, right? And you can use that, you know, to practice leadership that you bring with you into the workplace and vice versa. And oh, by the way, you know, that's service to our society too. I mean, I think we really need to re-energize, you know, our engagement in our communities. I think, you know, personal feeling is that kind of the era of big government's over, which is okay, because what I'm, you know, and I think one of the reasons that we're seeing so much turmoil right now is we're kind of past that age of, like, you know, mass production, you know, mass media, mass government. Now everything is about custom, right? But if you look at, you know, things like, you know, some of the things that are, you know, important to the millennial generation is authenticity and local. And I'm hoping, I think, as we see the millennials get a little bit older and you know, move into positions of leadership within civil society, and I say civil society, big picture, that's not just government, but that's, you know, all our volunteer organizations, community organizations, what have you. I'm hoping that we'll see that ethos of valuing the genuine article and local kind of have a bottom-up rejuvenation of our civil society, in a very flexible and customizable way, right? You know, if you tell a teenager or whatever that they can have Coke or Pepsi, or, you know, they can have one of, you know, two styles of jeans, they're going to look at you like you're nuts.
Yeah.
But that's what we do with our politics. You can have A or B. And I think, you know, one of the things that we're seeing right now is we're figuring out how to, you know, build more choice in. But anyway, got off track again.
No, that's good.
Bring me back, Antoine.
So check it out. Keep it techie. They said thanks for your service, and I served for 15 years. And also, Keep It Techie said, so true. Everybody has a different leadership style. So Josh, you gave me the story. I know we can go all night. I wanna concentrate on two specific areas. I want to talk about the opportunities to live throughout the world, being a person that works in the service industry, the military service or the civil service. Talk about that, because you've had many opportunities. And then I want to quickly pivot to the Black Heights Initiative, and then we can wrap this up. Okay. So talk about, you've lived all across the world. And matter of fact, we're going to hit on three things because we've got one of my good friends watching tonight, and he mentioned to me last night that he was talking about doing the Coast Guard thing that you and I was talking about before we started. We want to hit on that as well too. So talk about the opportunities to travel the world, be throughout the world, different things you can do based on your experience, Coast Guard, and then we're going to hit on Black Heights, and then we're going to wrap it up.
Okay, great. Yeah, so military, you join the military. A lot of the, we still have a lot of military bases around the world, Japan, Korea, Germany. So good chance that you could get stationed, forward like that. I think you're more talking along the lines of, which is great. You'll have those opportunities and experiences of living abroad. You can also, so that those are kind of standard assignments. If you want to get a little bit more off the beaten path,
let's talk about that.
So I started out in aviation, and then at about the 15-year point, transitioned over to a community called Foreign Area Officer. So I'm essentially a Navy diplomat, and I manage our military relationships with countries throughout the Indo-Pacific. And through that, I had the opportunity to move to Malaysia, work at the embassy for 4 years, where met Antoine and Teresa and their wonderful family. And that essentially, I'll tell you, if you ever get the opportunity to work in an embassy environment, it's incredible. So military is one way into international service for the U.S. government. State Department is another great way to do it. Some people have heard of this, the Foreign Service exam, which is a highly competitive exam. But don't let that intimidate you, because the State Department also has GS, which is government service jobs at embassies. Organizations like Department of Commerce or FBI also have overseas postings. So there are any number of ways into international service for U.S. government. Military is just one of those ways. And then, for instance, I'm focused on Indo-Pacific, but State Department, they really like to move their people around, and it's just incredibly exciting, and it's an incredibly important work.
Very much so. Very much so. I met Josh and many other Americans, either in the military, but also working for Department of State in Malaysia. And one of my good friends, Daniel, who was stationed in Malaysia and is now stationed in South Africa, and who knows where he's going next, right? And no, I think the life and the career success that I've never known anything about and saw until I actually got a chance to live over there, and what these guys do. It's a fabulous career and wonderful experience that you can get with these kind of careers, and being able to move around to different countries and work in these sorts of environments. So that's where I really wanted you, Josh, to touch up on that, to just explain that there were opportunities, within the military, within the Department of State, to be of service, international service, working for your government, working for your people, that gives you great, experience and great careers and things like that.
Absolutely. And keep in mind that we just don't talk about it these days, but two more great organizations are Peace Corps, that, people can do even just a couple years in that and get that international experience and do a lot of good. If you're a teacher, there are, overseas Fulbright teaching opportunities. USAID, U.S. Agency for International Development. Obviously, they do economic development, but they also have the Office for Foreign Disaster Assistance, right? Good point about the DoD clearance. That's definitely it's definitely marketable on the outside, and that's something good to have. Sorry, I saw.
No, that's good. So explain to people. Obviously, that's the Department of Defense. Why does it open it up?
It's not just so it's not just DoD. There are any number of ways through government service that you can gain a security clearance. there's some interesting things going on with security clearances in the news in the White House. So I won't get into that, but let's just say for normal people, it's very difficult to get a clearance.
Yep.
And it's also very expensive because there's an extensive questionnaire. They'll do interviews with references, and they'll follow up on the answers that you put in your questionnaire. What I'll say is, having been a security manager, one of the people who manages a clearance program for, in my case, an entire aircraft carrier, that was not a lot of fun. People think that, oh, I smoked pot a couple times, which, depending on where it is now, it's legal.
Right.
Till recently it wasn't. Or, I got arrested when I was a kid, or it's like, I'm not going to get a clearance. So they won't even put in, or even worse, they leave it off of the questionnaire. So the whole thing about it is that they want to make sure that, nobody can blackmail you. And so, if you have a couple hiccups on your record, as long as you're honest about it, as long as you're straight up about it and don't try to, leave it off, or, you don't get dinged necessarily for having a blemish on your record. You get dinged for having a blemish and lying about it. So, but it is, because it's expensive. It's like $100,000 to fully vet somebody, depending on the level. Private industry, if you bring that with you, they'll scoop you up, because that's money that they don't have to spend. Because certain contractor jobs or certain technical programs, you have to have that clearance, and if you don't bring it with you, the company's got to pay.
Got it. Yep. Very good explanation. So talk about the Coast Guard. A buddy of mine was talking about potentially joining to be of service to the country, but also at the same time is leveraging that to build his leadership, but also at the same time to look at advancing his education. Talk about how joining a Coast Guard can help him do that potentially.
So people, I love the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard is, our unsung military service. It is the 5th military service. They report to the Department of Homeland Security, although in times of war and certain circumstances, they can report to Department of Defense. So day-to-day operations, they're doing law enforcement in our coastal waters, rivers and bays. That runs everything from, everybody knows, the counter narcotics mission, but they do ship safety inspections. They do environmental security and cleanup response. They do, they do aids to navigation, so maintaining the buoys and the markers in intercoastal waters and what have you. Not the sexiest mission, but important, right?
Okay.
But more and more, they're operating forward as well. So there's a Coast Guard detachment in the Persian Gulf right now that provides security for some of the ports that we operate out of. Currently, there's a national revenue cutter that's forward in the Western Pacific that's executing some freedom of navigation operations through waters that China claims in excess of what they're entitled to under international law. So they have an aviation function as well. They do a lot of search and rescue. So helicopters, C-130s, other fixed wing aircraft. So it's a fantastic opportunity, and you're doing good. You're based predominantly out of the U.S., but that's an absolutely vital mission. And all the Coast Guardsmen that I know are fantastic folks. And there's also a Coast Guard auxiliary. If you're looking to volunteer part-time and you have a small boat on a bay or lake or river or what have you, you can look into volunteering with the Coast Guard auxiliary. My stepdad has been for a while.
Well.
Do you want me to hit on National Guard real quick?
Yeah, hit the National Guard as well too. Absolutely.
So one of the So one of the best programs out there that I don't think a lot of people understand or appreciate is the National Guard. So National Guard normally belongs to the governor of the state. Okay, can be federalized and be placed under U.S. government control and authority and deployed overseas or what have you. The nice thing about the National Guard is there's a lot more flexibility in it than active duty. So essentially what you do is you find the unit that does the specialty, right, that you're interested in, and you almost rush them like a fraternity, right? You get hired on by that unit. And if it's an aviation unit, they'll hire you on and they'll send you to flight school. And then you come back to the unit and you fly that aircraft. That's actually and then, you have to maintain your flight currency. So you have to fly X number of hours and however many weeks. But other than that, you fly as little to maintain the currency or as much as you want, right? There are also opportunities to be activated to do longer stints. You can change units, or you can stay with the same unit for an entire career, 20 years, right? That doesn't happen in the active duty. In fact, we leverage that longevity of National Guard units internationally through what we call the State Partner Program. So a lot of different state National Guards will be paired up with a sister, with basically a foreign country. So Washington State National Guard is partnered with Malaysia and Thailand. You can go online and you find all those partnerships. But it's great because in an active duty unit, they're all in constant motion, and you've got the personnel turnover so fast that it's really difficult to build and maintain a long-term relationship. Whereas when you've got guardsmen who are with the unit for 20 years and they do an exercise or, an engagement over and over and over again, they can really get to know the country and they can get to know the people. It's about the relationships.
Yep.
And, whether it's business, military, what have you, about the relationships. My job as a foreign area officer, where I manage our relationships with allies and partners, it's like, yeah, I speak foreign languages. Yeah, I know stuff about places. But really, it's the network that I'm able to build and maintain. And, when chips are down, I'm from Jersey. So we have a saying, I got a guy, right? when bad stuff is happening and we need to get to the right decision maker, or we need to refuel an aircraft somewhere, you call one of us, and if the front door is saying no, hopefully we've invested in our relationship, so we got a guy. We know to call Rizal. Rizal knows the guy who can free things up and make it happen. So that's in any industry, networking is critical. I guess my community is we're professional international networkers for the U.S. Navy, and all the services have foreign area officers like myself. So so National Guard, fantastic opportunity, part-time. Once you're qualified, as much or as little as you want. So super flexible, a little bit of extra money, a little bit of service, and predominantly, National Guard does a lot of civil support. So wildfires, National Guard is going to be military, but doing a lot of good work for the community as well. So.
Wonderful. No, that's a good explanation, Josh. I learned a lot tonight. So we're gonna talk about your thoughts on Black Heights now, because not only that, this is a network itself, and us educating each other, and me bringing folks like you to a platform to introduce them to my network, but also at the same time is to educate us all and talk about what your thoughts are on Black Heights, man.
So so I feel like I was there at the beginning. So you know my thoughts on Black Heights, but I guess I need to share with your audience now.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's a fantastic idea. All the research and just my experience has shown that the value of diversity the word diversity, it seems like it's overused, but it really is important to me. It's like you need to have as many different perspectives from as many different people as possible. And as I was saying before, in the military, we create this super culture that lays on top of all the cultures that everybody brings to the military. But you need the people on your team to look at things in a slightly different way and be able to voice that. And as leaders, and what I think Black Heights is striving to do is to help people find their voice and find their way into, because in the military we have a very set way of creating this overarching culture that people plug into. I don't think the corporate world has that. So I think because most companies don't have such a strong indoctrination or acculturation process, and maybe not, and definitely not as strong of a culture as the military obviously does, that new junior executives or new hires kind of have to figure it out by themselves. And it can be intimidating, especially if you look around and there aren't too many people from your background, right? So I think your role in through that mentorship and coaching to get people over that hump is invaluable. It's important to me, the military, as a military leader, it's important for me for there to be leaders for all of my troops that they can identify with. Case in point, so I was division officer on an aircraft carrier. I had 70 sailors working for me. About 25% were fantastic young women, right? They didn't have a single female officer or senior enlisted anywhere in their chain of command up to the president. So I can give advice, I can try to put myself in their shoes, but I've never walked a mile in their shoes. So, there's only so much perspective and advice that I can give them, because I haven't walked in their shoes. So,
that's deep, Josh. I like that.
I do think, and it's important, and how do you do that? For the Navy, we just put women on submarines for the first time, right? And when we did it, we didn't just drop, one or two in. We made sure that there was, kind of a critical mass of, several different, ranks and what have you, because, we appreciated the fact that this is a culture that, for better or for worse, I mean, it just was. I mean, submarines were an all male force. I mean, you can think of why that was. But, in its wisdom, realized that if we just dropped one or two ladies in, that wouldn't work. And so unfortunately, there's pipeline, but in the corporate world, maybe there's, until you get to a certain critical mass, it's tough. So, by you guys, by Black Heights providing that, kind of external mentorship and support, especially people just starting in the corporate world, I think that's invaluable. Because unfortunately, I think Navy's numbers look probably like corporate America's. I know on the enlisted side, we're right there, kind of reflecting, the demographics of the U.S. But we still have a ways to go with the officer corps. We're not quite where we need to be to reflect, like I said, our stockholders, the American people.
So no, that's wonderful, Josh. Thank you for that wonderful plug, my brother. I love to have everybody answer that question for me, because it's plugging what we're doing. And talk about this, right? We're gonna talk about the 3 takeaways for this video. For anyone that comes across this video, what is it that you want for them to take away from this? I learned a lot, and I can probably go through all the notes that I went through, but I want it to come from your mouth of the things that you talked about, from early education, early exposure, joining the military, dealing with adversity, you being social awkward, serving in being in middle school and being fascinated with flying,